Today I'm very pleased to welcome Leah Antle to Intersections. Leah is a music teacher here in St. John. She is a voice major by training, and she's completed a master's degree in choral conducting. She's very active in the vocal music community in St. John's, where she sings in a number of different choirs, and she is wrapping up currently 11 years of service as our choir director or songster leader here at St. John's Citadel. We're going to learn a little bit more about Leah in the next few minutes. Welcome, Leah. Let's get right into this because of the notion of faith intersecting with life, and it bringing a whole different dimension to who we are as people. And let's explore that a little bit. Faith is so personal, and it's a response that the individual has to God, His Son Jesus, and to the Holy Spirit. And as you have matured, what does this look like in your life?
Well, I was very fortunate. I grew up in the church. I always was involved in church activities. I grew up at the temple. I was involved in the songsters and the band. And for me, having a faith experience always sort of made me feel like I had a metered approach to life. It helped me feel very balanced. Okay. And that has really continued into my adulthood. In a lot of ways, I feel like it's guided some decisions that I have to make in a very practical way. It keeps me very even keel in how I approach the world. And I think certainly in dealing with children and working with large communities, I'm able to see them all as individuals who have a need, and that's been very helpful in my professional life as well.
Okay, let's talk about your professional life. You're a musician. We've established that, and there is something about sacred music and this whole faith dimension thing. Right? And can you articulate a little bit about that in terms of what do you find that connection to be? And are there pieces of music that speak to you in that kind of way?
I think music has this, and there's all kinds of really great quotes about music expressing what is inexpressible or putting to sound what can't be expressed in words. And all of those are totally factually accurate. Some of my favorite experiences have been listening to people who don't know anything about music talk about how a piece has impacted them. Because again, even those of us that know music can analyze the details and pick out the chords and study the structure of it. But when an unmusically taught individual can say, man, that made me feel something, that's really beautiful. I sing in some choirs that are secular in nature, and in the classical world there's a lot of music that is sacred but that is sung by secular groups, and it's always very interesting to me because whenever I approach text that I know is sacred in nature, I always connect with it, I think, differently than some of the other people do, which is a very interesting thing to happen. I love singing like old classical Latin texts, like a good Ave Maria gets me right in the feels every time.
You talk about sitting in a choir, singing sacred music, and you're coming at it from your faith background. And others come at it from wherever they are, and you're making good music.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a song at you.
Okay.
That really hit me when you were speaking, and it caused me to reflect on a similar experience I've had within the last few years. The song "Oh Love."
Oh, Derek, love it, love it.
For me, it was like, "Oh love that will not let me go."
Yep.
I cast my weary soul on thee. I traced the rainbow through the rain, etc., etc. And to me, that was a spiritual moment.
Oh, 100%.
And I wondered, as I looked around at my other choristers,
Yep.
and thought, where are you with
Oh,
this?
it's that one. And the story of, the real story of that is, like, again, heart-wrenching. The poet was, I believe, blind from birth. And he was raised essentially by his sister, who in their adulthood cared for them. And then later in her adulthood, she married. And so the text was him sort of like setting her free, which is just, whew, the true story of that is touching. And then you throw, I think it's a great Easter piece, like that notion of just being fully taken up in this love is just amazing. It's just amazing. It's such a good piece.
It is.
It totally is.
I digressed.
No, it's okay.
So,
So did I.
but that's good. COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
We're all tired of it.
Yep.
And COVID-19, I think it's fair to say, threw a lot of organizations and society on its ear.
Mm-hmm.
One of those structures would be the organized church.
Yep.
And I don't think, well, research is saying that church will never again be like it was prior to COVID because of a whole bunch of factors and a whole bunch of pivots that had to be made. And that word pivot is a COVID word,
Yep.
you know.
I just rolled my eyes. Sorry.
But those changes had to be made to maintain relevance, maintain contact. So as we emerge from the pandemic, from your perspective, what does the church need to do to maintain and in some cases initiate relevance to people who find us now in a different way? Because people, your story was that you came basically as a family and this was your life.
Yeah.
And there are others that will find us now for the first time, find maybe the gospel for the first time online. The church has to deal with all of that. What are your thoughts on some of that?
Well, I think there's a few takeaways for me personally from the pandemic. For most of my life, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of different ministry things. Over time in this building, I've taught Sunday school, I've taught junior soldiers, I've been in the YP band program, I've been in the senior band program, I've done the songsters, it's a lot.
And if I can interject, the whole divisional piece
Right.
of that.
And so then, I also have some divisional commitments as well. And so I think for me, as an individual in ministry, I'm trying to find ways to reduce little things and be more intentional and directive with my activity. So I think, in general, intention is I think that's maybe the theme of what I think post-pandemic for everybody, is we need to be intentional about how we engage and intentional about how we work in the community. I think for me that's very important. I think you're right. I think a virtual church or a virtual component is going to be really important. And I think, again, how we deliver that and how we engage with people in a virtual way is going to be really important. I also think that one of the things that we're going to have to maybe grapple with to some degree, in a way that I don't think we've had to in Newfoundland, is the notion of a multicultural church. I think we've seen just before the pandemic and certainly during the pandemic, an influx of new Canadians and newcomers, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I teach in a community that's very multicultural, and it impacts you in a way that you can't quite articulate when it's happening. And so I think that is something that we need to sort of think about as well, how we want to interact with new Canadians, how we want to bring them into our communities. I think all of those things are really positive steps forward post-pandemic. And for me, that's I think that's where we need to go.
The whole multicultural thing is so enriching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't have the corner on the market here, so we have a lot to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot to learn and to be enriched by as we embrace folk that are coming into our community, into our society, and please God, into our church fellowships as well. The other thing I think, and I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say about it, is that church historically has been linked to a time and a place, right? 11 o'clock on a Sunday, 25 Adams Avenue. Good morning and welcome to. Life's different now. Time and place don't matter.
Nope. Very, very, very.
And so we have people who want to grab a bit of church, a bit of ministry, a bit of something, a bit of something for the soul, help them get by. Their schedules are not what they once were, and so life is very harried in many ways. How do you see things like what we're doing today and other versions of possibilities of things that could come in the future? How do you see that speaking into people's lives?
Well, the beautiful thing, I think, again, post-pandemic, I think what we've learned is that there is much more flexibility than we ever believed that there was. And we created it. Everybody did. Businesses did, churches did, schools did. There's flexibility everywhere. And we just didn't know it.
Right.
We found it. One of the nice things that I find about maybe I shouldn't say this on camera, but here I go. I am guilty of not being up on a Sunday morning at 11 o'clock anymore. So being able to access services after the fact is really meaningful. And I'm sure that I'm not the only person in that boat, where the ability to find services from other places or tap into an app with a good devotional series on it has been really meaningful. To insert your spiritual practices in ways and places that you weren't able to before. I think all of that is very significant. And again, I think finding those opportunities as a church and being intentional about making them and promoting them, I think is really significant. And I think projects like this, where you can share your own story in a different way on a Wednesday afternoon, and hear from other people in ways that you haven't really been able to before, even when we were in person, I think is really meaningful for people, and creating those connections and community is really important.
As an educator, and as a former educator, we know what the research says about when adolescents learn best. And it's not when school is open.
Not when school happens. Nope, it sure isn't.
In the morning. As a matter of fact, it might very well be in the afternoon and evening, right? Again, so here's a whole new opportunity to reach that demographic when they're awake.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
When they're awake
Yes.
and when they're engaging, as opposed to, you know, head down on desk and all that kind of stuff. Oh no, it's Sunday again, I gotta go.
Right.
All of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's on their terms.
Right.
So we need to do something, I guess, that's going to really grab them if this is going to be meaningful as we move down the road. In your work with young adolescents, particularly in the church context now, in music, what are you seeing as things that we probably need to grab a hold of and do? Any thoughts on that?
I think you can edit my growls, right? I think that there is I think sometimes, and I think we all experience it as young people, we get stuck in I think I'm guilty of it as an adult, frankly. We get stuck in the how of the doing instead of the why of the doing. In that we know that we're supposed to do things and we know that this is traditionally the way that they're done, so we get into that path and we do them. And I think when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, 25, 40, sometimes the why gets lost or gets stuck. And so I think in working with young people, I think they have to see that what you're doing means something, and that there's a meaningful feeling, sentiment, joy behind it. And I think I think making them or teaching them that participating meaningfully and sharing something brings blessing to others. And that's a very interactive thing that they're doing, even though it feels very one-sided sometimes, especially in music, especially performing. It can feel very, I've practiced, I've prepped, I'm finished. But and that's the other beauty of music. I'm all over the map with my questions. But that's also the beauty of music, is that it feels one-sided, but you've shared something.
Absolutely.
It's very community building.
Last question. This has been very insightful. But as we wrap it up, some people get the notion that because you have a faith dimension, that you're all together, and that we just float through life and everything works our way. Mm-hmm. We know that's not true. We know that there are good days, bad days, tough times, medical challenges, you name it. Mm-hmm. It comes to the person of faith as well as it comes to anybody else. Mm-hmm. So if there's somebody out there now who is sort of sitting back and saying, yeah, well, that's good for you, but I'm not sure about this faith stuff. Got any words to say to them?
I know I just sort of talked at length about getting stuck in the how and not the why. But there is also something beautiful about coming to a place of comfort and community and sharing and grace and being broken and being stuck and not knowing the answers, but being surrounded by people who are experiencing the exact same things in different ways. And I think for me, some of my faith experience has been about being in community and about participating in some of those traditions and sharing in them. And so I think for anybody who's looking for that, I think it exists. You got to tap into it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I think you've touched on a key word. It's not about perfection. It's not about floating through life unaffected, but it is about grace.
Yeah.
It is very much about grace. Thank you so much for sharing the time with us today. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.